knowledgeable about the political history of the region, and maybe many of you may be learning in real time since Hamas's unprecedented attack. And you're trying to understand the complexities and the nuances, all, of course, while trying to process the horror of war. You're not alone in trying to balance when to lean in and when to look away. The stories of brutality and cruelty and devastation, they are truly shocking. The death toll is still rising. At least 1,200 people have been killed in Israel since Saturday, and that's according to Israel's public broadcaster. 900 people dead in Gaza, according to the Palestinian Ministry of Health. Mothers, fathers, children, brothers, sisters, neighbors, friends, slaughtered in the middle of their daily lives. Now, Israel is hammering Gaza with airstrikes, hitting hundreds of targets and reducing neighborhoods to rubble as new and unthinkable atrocities are being uncovered in its territory after the devastating attack by Hamas militants.
The bloody hands of the terrorist organization Hamas, a group whose stated purpose for being is to kill Jews. This was an act of sheer evil. More than 1,000 civilians slaughtered, not just killed, slaughtered in Israel. Among them, at least 14 American citizens killed.
But the numbers, they can't even begin to tell the full story. The toll that it has taken and will take is perhaps incalculable. This is about human lives that have been lost, human lives that have been traumatized, human lives that are still missing. A man who was abducted from the music festival attacked by Hamas gunmen.
The situation is brutal. Whoever saw the video got intimidated, right? It's horrifying to see your nephew in this situation, basically hit, brutalized, is something that anybody that is human will be, of course, shocked.
A woman murdered inside of her own home by Hamas, posting video of her dying on her own Facebook page.
My grandma was more concerned about my mom and my aunt's safety than her own. She was in the shelter, but she was just making sure that we're all safe, that we're good. And then within 10 minutes of those messages, we saw the video.
A man who says he played dead inside of a bunker as people around him were killed.
I just covered myself with dead people, a lot of dead people. So I stayed there inside like for hours, like just waiting for die, you know. I just wanted to die in peace because I suffered so much, the gas. I just, inside, in the middle of the gas, I just remembered, I don't know how it was, but now I know how it was. I just started to think how it was in the Holocaust.
A mother looking for her daughter, holding out hope that she may still be alive after fearing that she was killed and paraded through the streets.
We heard information that she is alive and that she has a bad head injury and is in a hospital. That's all we know, and that gave us hope.
A Palestinian-American mother stuck in Gaza with her 3 children with no way out.
It's terrible. My kids are very scared and they're afraid of what's going on. I have to explain all the time. I have to calm them down and trying to make them feel comfortable, safe.
So tonight, I'm going to talk about the human beings in these headlines. Now, I cannot control, nor am I trying to tell you how to feel about any of them. I can only tell you what has happened and what is happening and what might still happen from the real experts. Tonight, I'll talk to a survivor of the carnage at the music festival where 260 people were killed. And here with me in studio tonight to help put everything we're seeing in perspective, 2 people who know this region inside and out. Mark Dubowitz is the CEO of the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. He has advised 4 different presidential administrations, is an expert on Iran, and has even been sanctioned by them for his work. And Beth Sanner, a CNN national security analyst who is the former deputy director of national intelligence. Together with them and you and I, we're going to learn together. But first, a father whose son is missing after a massacre at his kibbutz. Jonathan Dekohen says he does not know where his 35-year-old son is after a Hamas attack near the border. And he joins me now. Jonathan, I'm so sorry about what's happening to your son and everyone at the kibbutz. Have you been in touch with U.S. officials about your son, and are they getting you any information?
Well, good morning. The picture on the screen is my beautiful son, Sagi, 35 years old, father of 2 wonderful, beautiful little girls, expecting a 3rd girl in a couple of months. The U.S. consulate in Jerusalem and the U.S. State Department as well contacted me last night, Israel time, and just to touch base to make sure that they had the correct information about my son as an American citizen, but they were not able to offer any information in there. For all of those, for well over 130 people from our region who are either verified as hostages in the Gaza Strip or missing, like my son, there's no information of any kind whatsoever since they were abducted on Saturday morning.
Have they given a kind of timeline of any kind of when they might expect to provide information, or are they still trying to uncover the details?
I can't speak for the American government or for the Israeli government. To be honest, I'm an Israeli American, but I've lived my entire adult life on kibbutzim in Israel along the border. A kibbutz is a communal farm. It is a place of beauty, a place of agricultural production, culture. I have no way of estimating how long it might take for any kind of negotiations, if they will ever exist, with Hamas as a terrorist organization, to free any of these people. And to keep in mind, we're not talking just about young men like my son. This is from infants to very elderly people who could not actually move on their own to be taken into captivity. They were taken in wheelchairs, dragged across fields in order to be taken back to Gaza. So we're talking about an absolute disaster. And in our case, perhaps a bit differently from those poor young people who were murdered at the music festival, this is our home. Our home was rendered utterly uninhabitable. The entire community and almost all of these border communities are no longer inhabitable because it was not just murder. It was not just barbaric treatment of people of all kinds. It was the utter destruction of our communities. We at this point have nowhere to go back to.
Jonathan, I understand that of the 400 people in your kibbutz, you say that fewer than half are survivors tonight. And what is to come now of those who remain and are accounted for? Where will you go?
Well, for the next week or so, the Israeli government has provided us temporary housing in a hotel in Eilat, a city at the southern tip of Israel that's very far from the fighting, and for the meantime, at least, is quite safe. The condition of my neighbors, my friends, my family, my grandchildren who survived is unspeakable at this point. All of them are in one or another state of trauma. They woke or were awoken around 6 a.m. on Saturday morning by something that can only be described as a pogrom. You know, the terrible images that most of us would have thought could not possibly reappear in the 21st century took place in my home over the course of about 6 hours between 6 a.m. And the time that the IDF, the Israel Defense Forces, actually came to repulse these invaders, these barbarians from our homes. And by that time, several dozen of our kibbutz members, from, as I said, infants, toddlers, to elderly people, were murdered in their homes, asphyxiated. All of our homes were set ablaze by these terrorists, visibly taken away, or taken away to Gaza as hostages, and we know nothing of their fate. Or like my son, we simply do not know exactly where they are. We know that they were on the kibbutz at that point. We lost communication with Sagit around 9:30 in the morning on 9:30 in the morning on Saturday, as he, like almost all of the other young men on the kibbutz, were doing everything they could to defend their families and everyone else's families on our very small community.
Jonathan Dekel-Chen, thank you so much for joining. And we are thinking of your family and your community and your son and his family, among so many others. Thank you.
Thank you.
Amid all those horrifying stories, Israel now appears to be preparing for a possible ground invasion into Gaza. I want to go to CNN's Matthew Chance, who is live for us right now in Tel Aviv. Matthew, President Biden pledging his support to Israel as more troops are moving to the border with Gaza. What do you expect Israel's next move to be?
Yeah, Laura, President Biden pledging his support and also placing the world's biggest aircraft carrier, remember, off the coast of Israel as well, to provide a deterrence in case any surrounding countries decide they want to try and intervene if and when Israel embarks on a land invasion of the Gaza Strip. Of course, the Israelis have not given a time frame for that, although the defense minister of the country today said that it would happen later. But in the meantime, remember that Israel has called up more than 300,000 of its reservists. It called just another 60,000 in the past 24 hours. It's deployed something in the region of 35 battalions in various places around the country, but directionally towards the Gaza Strip. And so every sign, every pointer on the ground is that preparations for a land invasion of Gaza of some kind are being set out. Now, if that does happen, and I think there's a lot of political pressure on the Israeli government to do something like that, I think it will have a lot of support amongst the Israelis, because we've spoken to even the most left-leaning of Israelis in this country that have been in the past opposed to incursions by the Israeli forces into Gaza. Even people like that are telling us that they now support military operations towards and inside of Gaza. And so the effect of these attacks by Hamas, and we've been reporting on how appalling they are, has had the impact of really uniting Israel in this moment of horror and rage and crisis. Remember, every Saturday for the past several months, there have been protests against the Israeli government. That has now ended. The political divisions have closed, at least for the moment, as the country sort of braces itself for what will be the next stage in this the war that it has said it is now engaged in. Laura.
Matthew Chance, thank you so much from Tel Aviv. I want to bring in our experts on the region. They are with me in studio. Mark Dubowitz, and also Beth Sanner are here with me. I mean, we're hearing these stories, and it gives you such pause. Your heart breaks and it sinks just thinking about the stories that are told and those we are yet to uncover. You heard from President Biden today, who has expressed support, obviously, for Israel as well, and confirming, although, that there are some Americans who are not only missing, but are hostages. Both of you have such expertise in this region. You lived there recently over the past 14 months, among other things. What does it look like, the response, and how complicated now that Americans are involved? How does that complicate and escalate the situation?
Well, it's certainly very complicated for President Biden. I mean, obviously, we've had American citizens killed, taken hostage. But I think President Biden, made it very clear that his support for Israel, as he said, is unwavering. I spoke to his Israeli friends who have witnessed these horrors over the past 3 days, and they said the first time that they actually cried was during President Biden's speech, because he gave such expression to their pain. And I think President Biden obviously has been through a lot of family pain himself, having lost a wife and 2 children. So I think for Israelis, they're incredibly grateful to the president. And I think the president himself, even though this is an incredibly complicated political issue for President Biden, understands that Israel has to do what Israel needs to do in order to destroy Hamas, the terrorists that have committed this genocide, and go after the weapons that are inside Gaza.
It was interesting, and he's often noted as sort of the compassionate in chief and comforter in chief. He did not talk about restraint. Some people were expecting him today in this speech not only to do what you're talking about, which cannot be given short shrift, but also to maybe address, would he talk about restraint? How would he address this? What are the options he has?
He doesn't actually have any options, I think, to restrain Israel. First, I don't think that he really wants to at this stage. I mean, I think that there is this sense that there's been this total paradigm shift. This isn't just a small incursion, I don't want to diminish anyone's life, but, maybe 1 or 2 people getting killed or, rockets going off. I mean, this is of a proportion that is unfathomable for anyone involved looking at this. And so that is why the Israeli public and the president over decades and decades and decades, very much committed to defending Israel. So this is part of his DNA and saying, this must stop. It can't actually happen again. And so now something has to be done to prevent Hamas from doing this again. And so that's where we are now. But I do think that we're going to reach a period in the coming weeks now, if this ground incursion goes forward at any scale. Maybe it'll be smaller and maybe it'll be probes in and out. So we don't know exactly what this will look like. But if it is at scale and there isn't some way of evacuating Palestinian children and innocents, we're going to see a lot of carnage. And I think then we're still seeing in parts of our own society people being a little bit wishy-washy about understanding what Hamas is all about and not understanding that really that they're a terrorist group.
Yeah, I think that's a very important point. And if I could just add one quick, I've been hearing now stories that haven't been reported yet about the scale of the massacre. Babies, hands tied, decapitated, bodies burnt, pregnant women murdered, their pregnant child ripped from their bellies with the umbilical cord still attached. These are stories that are going to increasingly come out, and it's this calculation for the president and for the Israelis is going to be informed by that.
The information that we continue to gather and assessing the veracity and the shock and the horror of all that we're seeing. Mark, Beth, stick around. We're going to rely on your expertise and really unpack in great detail what is happening together here. There's also a shocking report from Reuters. It says Hamas fooled Israel for months as it planned this brutal attack. I'm going to talk to the former director of national intelligence, James Clapper. What Israel needs to do, what does need to do about this, what it seems to be a huge intelligence failure. And also coming up, I'll talk to a man who actually escaped the music festival where 260 people were killed. I'll ask him what he is saying about his missing friends.
With Fast Signs, brew signature flavor into every sip and sign. Fast Signs, make your statement.
At SimpliSafe, we build advanced security sensors and cameras for your whole home, powered by 24/7 professional monitoring and Fast Protect technology, exclusively from SimpliSafe for faster police response. There's no safe like SimpliSafe.
This right here is confidence in a bottle.
Not only does it change you on the outside, but something in the inside, knowing that you're looking better.
It makes me feel so much more confident than I've ever felt in my life.
They are some of the hottest videos on social media. Those videos claiming to instantly get rid of bags under your eyes. Well, today we're going to see one for ourselves and let you be the judge. It's called Plexiderm, and lifestyle expert Annette Figueroa is here to tell us why she says this one is for real.
This one is for real, and I'm so excited. We even have a video, and you'll notice the model has bags underneath his eyes and some sagging, and all he uses is a small amount on a clean, dry face, and that's how easy it is.
All right, what's the active ingredient?
Okay, so it's silicates that are minerals found in shale rock, and what it does is it tightens and lifts the appearance of bags underneath your eyes in as little as 10 minutes, no prescriptions, and very little effort. Even watching the video, this is a real, it's a model, but it's a real guy with real bags underneath his eyes.
My real true opinion is holy words I can't say on camera. This is absolutely unbelievable. I mean, I could feel it just lifting my skin. It was amazing. It feels good. Feels great. Looks even better.
And I did this to my father. We were at home. So we applied it to his under eye bags. And let me tell you, we were so excited. In under 10 minutes, they visibly disappeared from view. And now it is literally part of both of our daily routines. He calls me every single month saying, "Hey, Annette, I'm out of Plexiderm, please send me more." And not only does it work on the bags, it works on the appearance of crow's feet, fine lines, and wrinkles. The way you want to do it is you want to have a clean, dry face. You use a small amount because it's so powerful. You have high school reunions, you have events you want to go to, you want to look years younger, this is it.
At our $14.95 price, it's the best way to try Plexiderm and see it work for yourself after your first application. Your solution is at plexidermtrial.com or call the number on your screen.
If you're 50 or over, you can be taking advantage of everything AARP has to offer right now. Join AARP for $12 for 1 year, and your second membership is free. Get instant access to discounts on everyday purchases, eye care and prescriptions, and tools and tips to help manage your money and maximize your health. Plus, AARP fights to protect your Social Security, Medicare, and more. Join and get an insulated trunk organizer free, plus AARP the magazine. Call or go to yesaarp.org now.
So many people are overweight now and asking themselves, why can't I lose weight? For most, the reason is insulin resistance, and they don't even know they have it. Conventional starvation diets don't address insulin resistance. That's why they don't work. Now there's Golo. Golo helps with insulin resistance, getting rid of sugar cravings, helps control stress and emotional eating, and losing weight. Go to Golo.com and see how Golo can change your life. That's GOLO.com.
These are the faces. Let's go! Face the reality.
We'll have to bring it every single night.
Face the opponent.
With a hand in his face.
And become the face of the game.
Game faces are on.
The Whole Story with Anderson Cooper is appointment viewing on Sunday nights. One whole story, one whole hour. The world's best journalists dig deeper into the stories they can't ignore. The Whole Story with Anderson Cooper, Sunday at 8 on CNN.
Well, tonight, President Biden is taking a harder stance against Hamas, calling the terrorist organization's attack against Israel sheer evil. Here's what he had to say.
The brutality of Hamas, his bloodthirstiness brings to mind the worst rampages of ISIS. This is terrorism. But sadly, for the Jewish people, it's not new.
Well, my next guest, he knows very well how these groups operate. He's CNN's national security analyst and the former director of national intelligence. James Clapper is here with us. Also back with me, Mark Dubowitz and Beth Sanner. Director Clapper, thank you for being here tonight. You heard the President of the United States, and he was comparing the brutality of Hamas to ISIS. And we have seen the horrifying videos, the indiscriminate killings. How did Hamas get to this level?
Well, I think it starts with the lengthy blockade that Egypt and Israel imposed on the Gaza Strip and restricting goods and services that had previously gone into the Gaza. And so about 40% of the population are youth. And I think many of this youth got radicalized. The frustration, the sheer hatred of Israel and Israelis is what led to this. And I think there were some other factors that probably affected the timing of the attack. The relationship with 50 years since the Yom Kippur War. And I think that strategically, I think Hamas grew concerned about, and as for that matter, their sponsor, Iran, concerned about the dialogue between Saudi and Israel, brokered by the United States as kind of a follow-on to the Abraham Accords, to normalize relations between Saudi and Israel. And I think Hamas found that extremely threatening and felt perhaps left out of the discussion. It's almost unfathomable for us in the West to comprehend the level of hatred and the animal-like behavior that has been inculcated among Hamas, rivaling, if not exceeding, the violence of ISIS. It is really hard to get your head around.
It really is, and it's an extraordinary comparison for so many reasons. And we're also reading and learning more. Reuters actually is reporting, Director Clapper, that Hamas actually misled Israel for months as it was planning the attack, and even may have constructed a mock Israeli settlement in Gaza where militants actually practiced a military landing and trained how to storm it. How could that have been missed then, if true, by Israel and also our own intelligence?
Well, Laura, I think, some years ago I toured along as a guest of the Israeli army along the Gaza fence line and got to personally observe the intense scrutiny that Israel mounted on a 7x24 basis into the Gaza. Cameras up and down the line, the fence line, signal intelligence collection, tapping into their telephones and all that. And I think Hamas went to school on the Israelis and just sustained what had become the normal intelligence picture that they portrayed to the Israelis. And I'm quite sure, and I think Beth has spoken to this, and I agree with her, that they did things in person, broke up into very small cells, probably each one of which didn't know what the other cells were doing. Now they didn't do this overnight or in a week. This took months of planning. And as a result of taking advantage of this normalcy, the normal patterns that they had exhibited, and then sub rosa, clandestinely, were planning and training for such a mission. Now, I can't speak to whether there was a training facility. There could have been, I suppose, and the Israelis, it would appear, if there was one, missed it. For the Israelis' part, they became preoccupied with other things, notably the West Bank, as more settlements, both licit and illicit, were established in the West Bank. That created a tense situation, friction and security incidents in the West Bank. So what the Israelis apparently did was try to automate as many of these surveillance stations as possible, even automated machine guns, which are unmanned. Well, again, Hamas went to school on that, and they took the communications relay towers out so that the cameras were no longer operative. And then that enabled them to use bulldozers, low tech but effective, to penetrate along the Gaza line in about 30 places. Now, I think the fighters they sent, and again, this gets to their fanaticism, were undoubtedly on a suicide mission. I don't believe, I have to believe they understood they probably wouldn't survive penetrating into Israeli territory. Now, this is me, guessing right now, speculating, theorizing as are others.
Sure.
At some point, I'm quite sure the Israelis are going to conduct a very thorough post-mortem of what occurred here.
But for now, Director Clapper, it's obviously about survival and trying to get back the more than 100 or 150 hostages that are being held as well. Thank you so much for lending us your expertise. We're going to come back to our panel as well and dive a little deeper into what can be described as the fracturing and also trying to focus on what has happened in the region and how it could have been perhaps diversified in such a way that intelligence might not have been able to intercept appropriately. But it's one of the most horrific moments of this conflict, the attack on the Israeli Music Festival. Hundreds of people killed, many at point-blank range. Next, I'll speak with one of the survivors who knows 20 people who are still missing.
Now look at them arcing up. This is the defensive missile system.
The worst single day in Israel's history since 1948.
We have just had a massive barrage of rockets coming in here.
I'm so sorry. It's okay. I'm so sorry.
And that pain has echoed thousands of families all across this country.
Our continuing coverage of the conflict here in Israel.
Now, ADT professionally installs Google Nest products.
Cool.
You're all set.
So your home is safe and smart.
We're gonna miss you.
You can check in on your home,
Arm the system. We should go.
manage your system from virtually anywhere, and get intelligent alerts like when a package has arrived. When the most trusted name in home security adds the intelligence of Google, you have a home with no worries. Brought to you by ADT.
There comes a time when you realize the kitchen you used to love is ready for a refresh. Let a Cabinets to Go design expert help you craft the look you want with quality products in today's designer styles and colors, backed by a transferable lifetime warranty. Out with the old, in with the new. It's that easy. From design to install, we do it all. Plus, get 0% APR for a limited time. Visit cabinetstogo.com to schedule your free design consultation today. Cabinets to Go. Wow for less.
Car Gurus. Shop, buy, sell online.
This past year, we've all let ourselves go a little. But now it's time for everyone to step up their game. With Wolf and Shepherd. Wolf and Shepherds look great with full grain, Italian leather, and classic styling. But they're my go-to shoes because of how they feel. Cushy, light, and super comfortable. Okay, guys, let's get to work.
DirecTV Sports Central gives you access to every game, but Terry doesn't have DirecTV. Come on, work with that. Here. Now, you can find the game easy. Barbecue is saved!
Visit DirecTV.com for up to a $400 reward card.
My barbecue is ruined.
From summer loves to fall flings. So many ways to save. Life ready, wallet happy. That's 365 by Whole Foods Market.
Question: how's your money management game? I tried spreadsheets, post-it notes, and mental math, but could never keep up with everything. That's why I started Rocket Money, an app to lower bills, find and cancel unwanted subscriptions, and bring your entire financial picture into focus. Download Rocket Money today.
The Whole Story with Anderson Cooper is appointment viewing on Sunday nights. One whole story, one whole hour. The world's best journalists dig deeper into the stories they can't ignore. The Whole Story with Anderson Cooper, Sunday at 8 on CNN.
ShipStation saves us so much time. It makes it really easy and seamless. Pick an order, print everything you need, slap the label onto the box, and it's ready to go.
Our cost for shipping, we're cut in half, just like that.
Go to ShipStation.com/try and get 2 months free.
We just signed the lease on our third shop. My assistant went to CustomInk.com to get new uniforms with all the locations. He found great products, uploaded new art, and had boxes sent to all the shops. Custom Ink makes it so easy. Get started today at CustomInk.com.
Those may look like handprints on your Flair sweater, but you just see happiness.
Blair clothing is meant to be lived in. It fits your life. Wet paws, unconditional love. A little mulch, a day well spent. Blair also fits you. Easy to wear with flattering styles. Easy to love with comfy fits. And easy to buy with great prices. The Blair Fit, clothing that fits your life, body, and budget. Get $10 off and free shipping at Blair.com with promo code Blair23.
I'm Warren Lieberman at the Pentagon, and this is CNN.
28-year-old Sagi Gabai was dancing and moments later running for his life. He was among the lucky ones, perhaps. We now know that 260 people lost their lives at the music festival near Reim, Israel. Tonight, Sagi's reliving that horrific, life-changing moment, but with a different message about his missing friends. Sagi, thank you so much for joining us this evening. You know, I know it's morning where you are, evening here in Washington, D.C., and you say that you hope that the people who you were with just moments before and are now missing, you hope that they were killed. Why do you say this? Sagi, I think we're having a moment of difficulty trying to hear him. I do want to hear his statements. I want to hear about his experience, and we will get back to him as soon as we can. I do have my panel here, and I think it's important. We just spoke to Director Clapper formally, and he was talking about how he believes Hamas became akin to ISIS, as President Biden had described. He spoke about, as one part of it, the blockade as one of the factors behind radicalization of a population that is now 40% youth in Gaza. You disagree with that assessment. Tell me why.
Well, I want to put it in a broader historical context and explain why there's a blockade of Gaza. Hamas took over Gaza after the Israelis withdrew every soldier, every citizen, every grave. And Hamas had an opportunity to build a decent society. It was a bitter Palestinian civil war where they actually killed and threw Palestinians off rooftops and shot them in the knees. Hamas takes over, and Hamas then begins to use the borders to bring in weapons and brings in concrete that you would hope they'd use to build hospitals and schools like any governing authority would. Instead, they build terror tunnels. They used to move weapons and fighters into Israel. And so this is why Egypt and Israel imposed the blockade. But Hamas was founded in the 1980s, and its founding charter explicitly calls for the extermination of Israel. And I can tell you, I lived there in the 1980s, the 1990s. I remember Hamas suicide bombings, where Hamas terrorists strapped suicide belts and walked into schools and cafes and discos and slaughtered Israeli children. So Hamas slaughtering Israeli children and women is not a new phenomenon, and it has nothing to do with the blockade. It has everything to do with Hamas's founding ideology, and it's been 35 years of slaughter of Jews that Hamas has undertaken.
And I guess, I mean, I agree 100% on that, and I think that, you know, understanding that Hamas has been a terrorist organization bent on the destruction of Israel since its founding, came out of the Muslim Brotherhood, and that has been consistent. I think that, you know, the conditions that they lived under, and partly this is also under Hamas's reign of terror in Gaza as well. You know, there are lots of people who live in Gaza that don't support Hamas. There are a lot of people that live in Gaza that are very afraid of Hamas because they're a terrorist group. But living under the conditions of the last, you know, 16 years or whatever.
Of the blockade. Of
the blockade certainly helps Hamas's propaganda. It allows them to radicalize new people to their cause. Their cause has never changed. They are who they are. They're terrorists.
And the why now, what does that speak to? It's not necessarily the irrelevance of the blockade. I don't understand either of you saying that point, of course, but the question for so many is who are looking at this. Why now? How could this have happened now, given the historical context and given the 16-year blockade? Why did it happen last Saturday?
It happened last Saturday because this plan is being designed and orchestrated out of Tehran by Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. Right? One has to understand that Khamenei has a long-standing plan to surround Israel with a ring of fire which are terrorists and weapons, on every border. And what Khamenei has understood, and he's had a long-standing partnership with Hamas and Hezbollah and Islamic Jihad, he's provided about $1 billion a year in funding, weapons, and support. And there's some disagreement about direction and control. But at the end of the day, what Khamenei wants to do is light up the fire in these borders. And he lit up the fire in the West Bank. Israel shifted its military resources to deal with the West Bank, and it left that southern border vulnerable. I agree with Director Clapper on the technical, tactical analysis about how Israel missed it completely and became overly reliant on technology and not on force buildup. But remember, Khamenei is behind this, and Khamenei has done a very strategic job of shifting these resources.
And I think that definitely Iran, they're absolutely fellow travelers. The meetings that started taking place in Beirut in the spring, where all of the regional militant groups got together and they all talked about how they were going to attack Israel. So this is all part of a shared interest. But I also don't want to take away the idea that Hamas, from its charter, has wanted to do this on its own. It doesn't need Israel to tell them what to do.
Iran to tell them.
To tell them what to do. Thank you. It's late. But they have their own interests, just like the Houthis in Yemen. So, I mean, some of this is just like there's slight nuances of difference here, but I think we all agree that this is a group of Islamic militants that are bent on destroying Israel. And the timing now, I think, has a little bit less to do with Saudi and normalization. But we can get back to that later.
We have to go. We'll be right back, leaning on your expertise as well. We'll talk to Saji as well, who, as you know, survived that music festival. More in a moment.
Lose weight fast with Nutrisystem's Partner Plan. Together, lose up to 18 pounds in the first 2 weeks. The Partner Plan is a great value. Partners save 15% more money versus an individual plan. Plus, lose up to 20% more weight than doing it on your own.
Together, we lost 85 pounds with Nutrisystem.
Get food for 2 people shipped free every 2 weeks. Save 15% more money and lose up to 20% more weight than doing it on your own. Call or go online to get started right now.
In 3 seconds, Pam will decide.
I'm moving closer to the grandkids. Wait, I gotta sell the house.
Don't wait. Just sell directly to Opendoor. Easy as pie.
Piece of cake.
Whichever. Get your competitive offer at opendoor.com.
My active psoriatic arthritis can make me feel like I'm losing my rhythm. With Skyrizi to treat my skin and joints, I'm getting into my groove. Along with significantly clearer skin, Skyrizi helps me move with less joint pain, stiffness, swelling, and fatigue. And is just 4 doses a year after 2 starter doses. Skyrizi attaches to and reduces a source of excess inflammation that can lead to skin and joint symptoms. With Skyrizi, 90% clearer skin and less joint pain are possible.
Serious allergic reactions and an increased risk of infections or a lower ability to fight them may occur. Tell your doctor if you have an infection or symptoms, had a vaccine, or plan to.
Thanks to Skyrizi, there's nothing like clearer skin and better movement. And that means everything. Now's the time to ask your doctor about Skyrizi. Learn how AbbVie could help you save.
It'll be an opportunity to travel the world and shoot all these amazing scenes.
We can shoot the whole thing in Turkey.
You see, Turkey has it all.
Cabin for 3 days, gonna be sweet.
What? I'm 12 hours short.
Have a fun weekend.
Was that necessary?
No, neither is a blown weekend. With Paycom, employees do their own payroll, so you can fix problems before they become problems. Get Paycom and make the unnecessary unnecessary. See you down the line.
Does someone who threatens Putin's power ever die unintentionally in Russia?
I don't think so.
He just leaves all this carnage in his wake.
Do you think he cares about that?
No, he doesn't.
Who is responsible for that image?
I take responsibilities for anything that happens in this city.
How dependent is the government on Elon Musk?
The answer to your question is we are very, very beholden to Elon Musk.
The Source with Caitlin Collins, tomorrow at 9.
When the details take precedence, the rest falls perfectly into place. We strip away everything but the essential, and what we're left with are thoughtful bedrooms for modern living. Thuma.
False or misleading search results can negatively impact your life. A bad online reputation can put you at significant risk of losing job opportunities or new customers. Reputation Defender helps clean up your search results, wiping away negative first impressions, allowing truthful, positive content to rise to the top. Don't you deserve to have more control over how you're represented online? Get your free reputation report card at reputationdefender.com or call 1-877-866-8555.
Yo, dude, you need some help?
Don't worry about me.
Yo, there's no shame.
No shame. You don't know my family, man.
It's okay to ask for help. Find a licensed therapist at BetterHelp.com.
This is CNN, the world's news network.
I'm back with 28-year-old Sagi Gabai, who is reliving that horrific moment at the music festival in Israel attacked by Hamas. Sagi, thank you so much for joining us. I'm glad to have you here. I was asking you earlier, you say that you hope the people that you were with moments before and are now missing were killed. Why do you say this?
Yeah, it's a bit funny, I guess, but like, I think it's a better destiny to be killed than be holding by Hamas terrorists in Gaza right now. I don't want to imagine what happened to people that get kidnapped, and they don't have like mercy for no one. I mean, women, children, elders. So it's a bit weird thing to say, but this is what I think it's better to be dead than be kidnapped.
Sagi, take me through those moments after the attack. And you and your friends, I understand, you ran for hours. What were you thinking for all of those miles?
You don't really think. You're like in survival mode. You just try to move from situation to situation, and like lots of people start talking in the phone with their parents, with their family, with their friends. They try to tell them what to do or where to hide or where to go, but they don't really know where exactly we are. So any kind of information could land you to wrong decision, and then every wrong decision could land you to be dead or to be kidnapped. So you just need to try to trust your instincts and just try not to think right now and just act. This is what I did. I actually broke my ankle during the running, but I didn't feel it because of the adrenaline. So this is like this is how you manage. Like, just try to run for your life and try to hide. Like there were like missiles above our heads, and you don't mind it because it's not your problem right now. Even though like missiles above your head is super scary, but you look for a terrorist and the side of you, so just look aside and try not to get killed. This is how you manage it, like
just running for your life and just that adrenaline. It's unimaginable to think about what you endured and what it's been like since. I mean, you've mentioned you left 20 people behind. Can you tell me what it's been like to try to locate them?
Yeah, I mean, it's important to understand. Like the Nova, like the festival, is a community. So basically, everyone knows everyone. There has been like 3,000 people, but the circle is very close. So all the people knows kind of all the people. It's friends of friends, and it's really unreal situation unreal situation to live right now, because you just see your friends posting the photos in the social media of your friends and people you know, people you spoke, like people I spoke with in the party. So now they're missing. People I just get to know in the party, people I know from before. It's crazy. It's crazy situation to be. So like, I said to people who ask me how I feel that I didn't even have time to process my trauma, because now my heart is with the people stay there.
Sagi, goodbye. Thank you so much for sharing. Unbelievable, the harrowing experience that you've endured. We'll be thinking of the people that you continue to look for. Thank you so much. We'll be right back.
Thank you, Laura.
This is AG1, foundational nutrition to support whole body, brain, and gut health. Vitamins, minerals, pre- and probiotics, adaptogens, functional mushrooms, all that in this. Start at drinkag1.com.
Lumify?
It's kind of amazing. Wow. Lumify eye drops dramatically reduce redness.
In 1 minute.
And look at the difference. My eyes look brighter and whiter for up to 8 hours. Lumify really works.
See for yourself.
You should Angie that.
Angie, what?
Angie that. It means connecting with skilled professionals for all your home projects, from repairs to renovations, so you can get the most out of your home. Get started today at Angie.com.
This is a cluster that happens when marketers group all their customers together. MailChimp uses real-time behavior data so you can personalize email for every customer. Turn customers into customers with Intuit MailChimp.
It's nothing.
Sounds like something.
When you have nausea, heartburn, indigestion, unsystemic diarrhea.
Pepto-Bismol coats and soothes for fast relief when you need it most.
Feeling sluggish or weighed down could be a sign that your digestive system isn't at its best. Metamucil gummies make it easy to get the fiber you need, promoting your digestive health for a better you. Metamucil gummies, the easy way to get your daily fiber.
It's true. Contacts are great until they get dry. So we created new BioTrue Hydration Boost for contacts for a boost of moisture that lasts up to 8 hours. So all kinds of contacts can stay comfortable throughout the day. And it's preservative-free. Stay BioTrue to your eyes.
I sign up for free trials all the time. What I don't do is cancel them. Rocket Money uncovers hidden subscriptions and notifies you when a charge is upcoming. From there, you decide if you want that service. And if not, cancel it right from the app with one tap. Download Rocket Money today.
What did I say about using my Old Spice dry spray?
I need long-lasting freshness.
Baby D, we all family. Your lavender is our lavender.
Remember when we used to steal his Old Spice body lotion?
Used to.
I'm gonna walk you through everything I eat in a day. Not today, sis. Unless you plan on orbiting Earth, you don't need to eat powder for every meal. With Noom, you can still enjoy your favorite food and reach your goal weight. Get started with Noom today.
Frustrated by skin tags? Dr. Scholl's has the breakthrough you've been waiting for. The first FDA-cleared at-home skin tag remover, clinically proven to remove skin tags safely in as little as 1 treatment.
Sometimes Jonah wrestles with falling asleep, so he takes ZzzQuil, the world's #1 sleep aid brand, for a better night's sleep. So now, he wakes up feeling like himself, the reigning family room middleweight champion. Better days start with ZzzQuil nights.
There comes a time when you realize the kitchen you used to love is ready for a refresh. Let a Cabinets to Go design expert help you craft the look you want with quality products in today's designer styles and colors, backed by a transferable lifetime warranty. Out with the old, in with the new. It's that easy. From design to install, we do it all. Plus, get 0% APR for a limited time. Visit cabinetstogo.com to schedule your free design consultation today. Cabinets to Go. Wow for less.
At SimpliSafe, your safety is the only thing that matters. Introducing 24/7 LiveGuard protection, only from SimpliSafe. This exclusive technology allows SimpliSafe agents to help stop crime in real time by speaking through the new Smart Alarm indoor camera.
Stop. This is SimpliSafe. Police are on their way.
For instant intruder deterrence and faster police response.
Police have arrived. Your home is safe.
Advanced home security, 24/7 professional monitoring for less than $1 a day. There's no safe like SimpliSafe.
Need to get your windshield fixed?
SafeLight makes it easy. You can schedule in just a few clicks, and we'll come to you with a replacement you can trust. It's great. That service on your time. Schedule now.
SafeLight Repair, SafeLight Replace.
You're looking at live pictures of Gaza at the start of the 5th day of this conflict. Since Saturday, more than 1,200 people have been killed in Israel, according to the country's public broadcaster. 900 have been killed and died in Gaza, according to the Palestinian Ministry of Health. For more information about how you can help humanitarian efforts in Israel and Gaza, go to cnn.com/impact or text RELIEF to 707070. That's 707070 to donate. Thank you all for watching. Our live coverage continues after just a short break.
Your best defense against erosion and cavities is strong enamel. Nothing beats it. New Pronamel Active Shield actively shields the enamel to defend against erosion and cavities. I think that this product is a game changer for my patients. It really works.
Ready to feel what it's like when you can do more with less asthma? It's possible with Dupixent. Dupixent is not for sudden breathing problems. It's an add-on treatment for specific types of moderate to severe asthma and can help improve lung function for better breathing in as little as 2 weeks. Dupixent helps prevent asthma attacks and can even reduce or eliminate oral steroids. Are you in? Dupixent can cause allergic reactions that can be severe. Get help right away if you have rash, chest pain, worsening shortness of breath, tingling, or numbness in your limbs. Tell your doctor about new or worsening joint aches and pain or a parasitic infection. Don't change or stop asthma medicines, including steroids, without talking to your doctor. Who knows what you can do when you do more with less asthma? Ask your asthma specialist about Dupixent.
I used to leak urine when I coughed, laughed, or exercised. I couldn't even enjoy playing with my kids.
I leaked too. I just assumed it was normal.
Then we learned about Bulkamid, an FDA-approved non-drug solution for our condition.
It really works, and it lasts for years. It's been the best thing we've done for our families.
Visit findrealrelief.com to find an expert physician near you. Ask if Bulkamid is right for you and discuss potential risks. Results and experiences may vary. Move beyond the leaks.
Pop quiz. Did you know you can lose weight with a plan that fits your budget and your goals? Introducing Quick 9 from Nutrisystem. Lose up to 9 pounds your first 2 weeks. You get delicious frozen meals delivered right to your door with convenient shipments at an affordable price and fast weight loss.
I'm saving money and I'm losing weight.
It's flexible, it's affordable, and it works. Get off to a fast start with Quick 9. Call or go online right now to get over 50% off plus free extras.
No.
No.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Isn't this great?
Yeah! Yeah. I can do a cartwheel in here.
Oh, hey! Would you like to join us?
No. We would love to join you.
The Whole Story with Anderson Cooper is appointment viewing on Sunday nights. One whole story, one whole hour. The world's best journalists dig deeper into the stories they can't ignore. The Whole Story with Anderson Cooper, Sunday at 8 on CNN.
ShipStation saves us so much time. It makes it really easy and seamless. Pick an order, print everything you need, slap the label onto the box, and it's ready to go.
Our cost for shipping, like, we're cut in half, just like that.
Go to ShipStation.com/try and get 2 months free.
What does human talent look like?
Just go on Fiverr. See for yourself.
Imagine working with them.
Yeah, imagine that.
Custom Ink helps us motivate our students with custom gear. We love how Custom Ink takes care of everything we need so we can focus on the kids.
Custom Ink has hundreds of products to help you feel connected. Upload your logo or start your design today at customink.com.
BetterHelp makes therapy accessible to all for a number of different reasons. Sometimes people are looking for that relatability. They're looking for someone who looks like them.
Being able to share parts of your identity with your therapist can be really important.
I'm Zachary Cohen in Washington, and this is CNN.
Closed captioning brought to you by InventHelp. Call 1-800-710-0020.
Do you have an invention idea but don't know what to do next? Call InventHelp today. They can help you get started with your idea.
Call now, 800-710-0020.
This is CNN Breaking News.